Got it. Okay, well, welcome to this final review, goodbye, celebration meeting for our latest inquiry, in which I think we're able to take from the contributions of the digital stories to look at what others have done and to distill from that some interesting issues and themes and to think ahead for the future. So it's a sort of looking back and looking forward kind of meeting, but I think it should be celebratory. I wondered whether we should have bunting and that sort of stuff, but I decided no, maybe it wouldn't translate somehow onto Zoom. But I think we may have others joining us later. We have apologies from Victoria and Russ, so we'll just have to bear with people emerging perhaps from behind the furniture as we go on with our discussion. So Norman, did you want to start us off with some thoughts about themes?
Yeah, I'll just say a few opening remarks just to give us a bit of context. Yeah, okay, so when we started this inquiry, we thought of a word to describe what it was we were trying to do, and we came up with pathways. And that idea of pathways is very much recognizing that what we're involved in is a journey. And I love this little Brenna Quinlan drawing recently, and that's actually going to be the front of our magazine this time. But it's not one journey, it's many, many journeys. In fact, our whole life is a journey, an endless journey, and composed of multiple journeys. So that's, I guess, the first point to make, that although we've been on a journey, and this is actually the third journey that we've made through this inquiry process, we are collectively on a whole range of journeys, and even within our own journeys, we are wandering around and probably on several journeys at the same time. So we can visualize, I think, what we're doing as this sort of network of journeys out of which we're growing new understanding. And of course, our journeys are all played out within the life-wide dimension of our life, all those different environments which we inhabit with different people doing different things. And I think the idea would be that our life-wide journeys are connected, integrated over time through our lifelong journey. And it strikes me that the world itself is based on the idea of community. And again, another one of these fantastic drawings by Brenna Quinlan seems to illustrate this, that everything in nature is connected and everything in some way contributes to other living and not things. And in a sense, we've tried to emulate that idea within our collaborative notion of inquiry by building a community of people. And it's clearly recognized within the SDGs, this idea of partnerships. But what I wanted to draw out a little bit, I think, is the idea of companionship and the fact that within our community, as we've traveled on these different journeys, there's been a lot of companionship. And Melissa, in your just opening remarks a few moments ago, you were talking about, we have encountered adversities and things which have stopped us doing our thing. And the very fact that we are with other people, and we can see that other people are trying to cope with what's happening in their lives, I think, is a good illustration of how this idea of companionship works. So this has been, for me, one of the interesting things that has emerged, the value of companionship when you're involved in these sorts of journeys, which are helping us progress towards learning how to help nature, help the environment, help sustainability, whatever. One of our companions has been education throughout. And again, the more that I've thought about this, the more central education becomes to this whole idea of learning to live a life for a sustainable future. I came across this interesting little conceptual framework recently by Walls and Keft to map out the idea of what the different domains within which education for sustainable futures is played out. On the left, you've got essentially like the teaching domain of authoritative compliant, prescriptive, prescribed, if you like, ideas of learning. And on the right there, something which is much more participatory and experiential in nature, and much more social in the way that new learning, new knowledge is constructive. And that's where our own life-wide inquiry sits, and the idea that we're involved in these journeys for reasons of self-education. Our process has been sort of honed over a few years, and it comes down to these sort of three basic things of being able to, with a lot of choice and a lot of flexibility in what we do, but being able to create and participate in our own journey, our own pathway. And in this case, focused on nature, the environment, and sustainability. And it's essentially a learning through experience and through doing things. We are, if you like, as part of this journey, delving into information, finding information sources, and then maybe using some of that information. But the primary task is one of experiencing, acting on something and then experiencing it. The second element, the idea of recording in some way what we do, that's in a way that's helpful to us, and therefore it's open in the sense that we can use any media, any format to make our recordings, but that provides us then with some sort of knowledge base, personal knowledge base, that allows us to reflect and develop our understandings. And then the third element is the idea of sharing that journey, and we just talked about it, through having companions with the journey, coming together periodically to explain what we're doing and discuss what we're doing, and to inspire and motivate each other as a result of that, and through our presentations, digital stories. And that makes it the social experience makes it a much richer experience for learning and ultimately development. And in this particular inquiry, we focused a lot on motivation. It came up as an important issue in our last inquiry, and we've really tried to delve into it, and I think made some progress in understanding the nature of motivation for action. Again, if we go from left to right, using Dewey's idea that we are, if you like, the compilation and integration of a life of experiences, including our educational experiences, and who we are is the integration of lots and lots of things. But I think what we have developed over these inquiries is the idea of connected self. We're not just an isolated being, we're an interbeing connected to others and to other things. Our contexts are our everyday environments, including family and work, community. And I think perhaps we might include the idea of sustainable future as a context within which we're working. It's certainly a bit of a driving force for the things that we're choosing to do. And our needs, as we have worked through over the last couple of inquiries, are quite multidimensional. We have many different needs, and whatever we do, we are to some extent satisfying or not satisfying those needs. So in terms of the roadmap, if you like, of how motivation emerges, it's to do with ourselves and our past histories, as we've said, interacting with our environments and the people and the things in those environments, through our increased awareness as a result of the education that we've subjected ourselves in to learn about the SDGs. We perceive the world in particular ways, and a range of feelings emerge as we feel some sense of responsibility, perhaps, or concern for, or love, passion for something, or some injustice, some emotional element triggers action, and we engage in that action and live our experience, gaining feedback as we see the effects of our actions, and we learn and adapt on the way. And through that whole experience we undergo, we become a different person. And our motivation, therefore, is key to driving us forward in a particular way to try and do particular things. And I think, again, coming back to this idea of collaborative inquiry, that what we're doing is encouraging each other. And through this inquiry process, we are actually gaining some dimension of motivation to act for this sustainable future, and in the same process then educating ourselves. So the idea of the community, of companionship, is very much part of the motivational framework for what we're doing. You know, those are a few opening remarks, and I'm going to hand back now to Melissa, who's going to steer us through some discussions using these themes. I'll just leave that on for a minute, Melissa.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Norman. That's a reminder and some prompts for us to be thinking about. Oh, by the way, welcome, Glyn, to the meeting while Norman was talking. So what we have in front of us at the moment is some prompts for our discussion for most of the rest of our time together. Looking at the digital stories and then thinking about the experience of the last few months working on our own and together. I wondered if, sorry, Jenny, I couldn't see. Are you signaling? Yes.
Can I raise an issue that's not on that slide, but on one of the previous slides, the question about building the community. And I think we've been very fortunate that we've had a chair as you, who has been so empathetic and been able to build that. It led me to think about in previous projects, we've used things like LinkedIn. Is it because we've not used LinkedIn that maybe we have changed the nature of the community that we've built, the fact that we have been face-to-face through Zoom, whereas if we'd used LinkedIn, we might have found that we were moving to in the four-dimensional model that you showed, Norman, upwards into the more authoritative, more formal zone.
An interesting thought. I don't know, was everybody involved in previous versions where there was much more kind of chat? Okay, I was just checking because I didn't think so. There was more, well, chat isn't quite the right word, conversations, not involving everybody talking about everything, but every now and then there'd be a flurry of discussion on LinkedIn, and then it would go slightly quieter and somebody would come in with something else and a couple of days later or whatever. But there was much more than this time, where generally speaking our meetings have been the discussion, and there have been a few posts on LinkedIn prompts or reminders. Norman, you commenting on that?
I think this has been deliberate. We've run 3 inquiries. They've gone from 6 months through 6 weeks through 3 months through 6 months, and in the 3-month one there was a definite drop-off of people using the platform. And I think maybe I stated it this way, but I felt that to try and keep conversations going through LinkedIn over a long period of time just wouldn't work. And that was so that the tactic was to then have the Zoom meetings as a one point in the month where people ideally would come together to have a conversation. So yes, it was definitely steered. It was definitely steered this way, but it was my perception that we just could not sustain the sorts of conversations over a long period of time that we were having over a few weeks.
So Jenny, are you replying?
Yes, my response to that is, I mean, I understand that, and I think what was beginning to happen through LinkedIn was that we were splitting the group, rather that individual conversations, maybe 2 or 3 people were having conversations, whereas we've remained much more as a cohesive group through using the Zoom platform. And I have to say that I've found each of the meetings really reassuring, and I've come away reinvigorated each time, really motivated to continue.
What about others' experience of the meetings? Have they been helpful in, I mean, obviously not helpful for people who are not here today, but
I might chime in there.
Yeah.
This is interesting for me because this is my first one. So I haven't been, I wasn't engaged in the LinkedIn platform previously. And I do know some things came through which I viewed, but I didn't tend to react to. And I can't really imagine this working as well on LinkedIn, and that's just purely because I've nothing to compare. But it's been really, for me, it's been really, even if I haven't been speaking, it's been really immediate, and it's been really, it's evolved. Whereas I think LinkedIn would probably have been more linear in a way, maybe if that's where it had been. And I think the connections certainly we've made, even though we are on Zoom, and we don't all still love it, and you know, the in-person is great. I think there's just something about being able to bat over and back and having a thought in an immediate sense and reacting to that or taking note of that certainly has been really rich. And I can't quite imagine, and I can see, Norman, what you would say, that even with a burst of enthusiasm in the beginning, that life gets in the way more easily with something on LinkedIn, and that I could see how it might drift. Whereas I certainly would say as well with these meetings, the regularity of knowing it was that first week of the month. Even if you thought you weren't going to make it, you knew what was coming up or when it was coming up, so you could kind of work it into the calendar. So I certainly think that also was beneficial as well.
What about you, Glyn? Yes.
It's quite interesting, this conversation, because two very good friends who both did their PhDs on this sort of argument, and the notions of synchronicity and asynchronicity are quite important. But I would say it should not be necessarily seen, although to some degree I agree with all that's been said about the benefits of Zoom over something that is like LinkedIn. The continuing self, as I think of it, and the continuing learning can happen. It shouldn't just be an either or. It can be a both and. And I think that sometimes we see things A or B, but it's not. It's A plus B. That's all I wanted to add at this moment.
And some people feel more confident at taking time to think and say something, all of those things. And maybe some of us did use some of the space in LinkedIn every now and then this time, but it was certainly different. I think we're actually answering number 3 at the moment. We're talking about thoughts and feelings about our experience, which is fine. We don't need to go through them in this particular order. But that seems to have been something that's come out, that the feeling of community, which really was prompted by your flagging that up, Norman, as a key point. And this is one representation of our community.
Yeah, I just want to make one other point about the use of LinkedIn in the way we used it in the first inquiry, which was we structured the inquiry. We wanted more text-based feedback from individuals. So we actually encouraged people to make a post, a weekly post, in the very first inquiry we did, which was quite, I mean, we still had reasonably good participation, but it was quite an onerous thing for people to have to try and generate a substantial post once a week. But it did generate a lot of posts, and therefore a lot of potential for discussions. As Jenny said, it tended to be a relatively small group of people, and obviously the facilitators were key to sort of prompting the discussion and encouraging it and giving feedback in a way that would encourage further discussion. But we did end up with a lot of text-based material at the end, far more than this has done. But I think the conversations we've had on Zoom have been more interesting, and the way people have presented what they're doing on Zoom have been more interesting to my mind than text-based reports, as it were.
I think also, just for context, that first inquiry was at a strange time in our history, a time of a lot of, well, there's uncertainty always, but it was I think it was a unique time. And this spanning from April through to October has been at a particular time with different pressures for different people at different times. So there's that to take into account as well, in terms of the differences between the
Mm.
inquiries.
But I guess there
Okay.
is a question about the length of time. I mean, but 6 months is hard
Yeah.
to stay the course, isn't it? And you know, is 6 months too long? Should these inquiries be framed over 3 months, say, rather than 6 months? I think the intention was always that if you're trying to do something that's fairly substantial, you do need time. And Josie's story is very much around
Yes.
the length of time required to actually see the effects of what you're doing.
Yes.
Obviously, the nature of the project then determines whether you can see results quickly or more slowly.
Yes, Jenny.
I think, in a sense, numerous people, including yourself, Melissa, have identified the need to change hearts and minds before you can actually start doing anything. And therefore, the 6-month period enables people to tackle that stage before getting into the practicalities of what they're trying to achieve.
Yes. And when I think about some of the photographs showing a transformed garden, for example, that actually was able to show over time, you know, a different season. So in some ways, the time scale worked well for people. But one of the things I've learned is, and I mean, Josephina talked about resultless and then talked a lot about things that had happened, but the feeling that you haven't had long enough to see results. But so I think we do need time, and a shorter time is a bit like planting the seed and going away. Whereas,
that has been a common theme that's come out of the surveys as well, that it's been a double-edged sword, that people are frustrated when they don't immediately see results.
yes,
but on the other hand, they're grateful when they have seen the project through, that they have stayed with the project and achieved in the end.
So there's no real conclusion there. It's the double-edged sword. Yes, sorry, Glyn.
Yeah, I think what has been said concurs entirely with what we know about all forms of action learning. That it takes time, and the results may differ at different periods, and it's interesting to see how those emerge. But in the long term, all effective change takes time.
Is there an argument then for maybe almost reconvening the group in, say, another 6 months' time or 3 months' time, just to do a check, to offer the opportunity to come together to just say, yeah, something has happened since then, or nothing's happened, you know, but just to take stock, if you like, of, and give ourselves that bit more time around these themes.
If I might, I would say in terms of the action learning approach, a few months is relatively little. I would say yes. I would actually target 3 months and then 6 months, and then and see it over a 2-year cycle, because then you can see how many you can have time to count your bees this year, next year, and possibly the year after, Norman.
Yeah.
And I can see my grandchildren go to school and
Yes.
But playing devil's advocate again, it might persuade people to stick with it who perhaps were not as motivated.
So, in other words, in our final communications to the group, we need to say that this is what we're going to do.
yes, there's an element of these meetings keeping you going as well. It's a bit like New Year's resolutions, isn't it? Which, you know, whatever you think of New Year's resolutions, they say you should tell other people. So other people say, how's it going with the so-and-so? Because if you just keep it to yourself, you can be very forgiving of just forgetting it on January the 6th. So, I think because we're talking with others, it's a sort of, well, solidarity was a word I used, which is a bit like we're in this together and we're sharing the journey, but we're still keeping on with it. So maybe there is, you know, I mean, we might find that we have very small meetings, but it's a bit like the alumni, isn't it? Or alumni, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a sense, we're already answering question 1 as well, in that we're identifying motivation,
Yeah.
the methodologies we've identified.
Yes.
It's been something we touched on before we started recording, was that the variety of the projects has been amazing and really fascinating. Nevertheless, there are certain common themes emerging. I'll stop talking now.
Absolutely. I was really struck. I decided not to look at the digital stories. I was late with mine. I wasn't well. I didn't have a voice. So my voiceover became problematic. But eventually I thought I will look at them all together. And I was amazed at things that came back. You know, it was like watching a program, you know, a television program where the same sorts of themes came out in very, very different contexts. So for me, one of them was these sort of surprises, the unexpected, the accidental, the opportunities that turned up, the links, the connecting. You had this thing in mind, and so you saw all those opportunities. But there were also significant surprises, which seemed to be nice surprises. So, and I personally had one of those. But I saw that in other people's work. Even where, Norman, for example, you are connecting with a much bigger community for your project than I was with mine, but there came opportunities, didn't there? And you sort of found something that already existed that you might have known about, but you sought it out.
Yeah.
And then came all these opportunities. So it's almost like you don't know what you're looking for when you know you find all those things.
It's a constant unfolding process, and the connections you make, you don't, you know, from one day to another, you don't know what connections you're going to make, and then you make a connection, and it is just an endless process. And again, having time to come back to it again in a few months' time, I think might be really helpful in not only seeing the benefits of the seeds that you've sown, but also in seeing the new connections you've made and the relationships you've developed as a result of the work that's already been done in the project.
And some of those sort of, I mean, I know that things going viral has all sorts of bad connotations, but it is amazing how a conversation starts something and then someone tells you about that conversation sometime later, and you didn't realize at the time that you were having any influence or even being listened to, and it sparked something for someone else. It'll be interesting to see what comes of that over a longer term.
Well, as educational developers, I'm sure we've all been, that's the life, isn't it? You've no idea what effects you're having, and as a teacher, you've often no idea of the effects you're having on other people. I mean, that is the nature, isn't it, of these sorts of interactions?
Yes. It's nice when you get that feedback.
But also, I mean, I'm taking I'm thinking through the idea of intrinsic rather than extrinsic feedback, and what motivates us and has come out so clearly from all of the stories is this need for self-actualization. We've all felt a need, or we've all been motivated by the fact that we have felt that we are learning, that we're developing. And it's a chicken and egg, I don't know. And I put a question in the chat. Are we a typical group? I mean, would a group who are perhaps not educationalists be motivated in the same way, or would we have to adapt our methodology for them?
Yeah, they won't be. I mean, we are a group, and we're a group of a particular kind. So what we're doing will not necessarily work for other people.
So intrinsic motivation isn't necessarily going to be sufficient if we wanted to roll this out.
people will be motivated by different things, won't they? And if we were facilitators trying to help other groups, then we'd have to work with them to try and find out what would motivate the individuals in that group. And it's not necessarily the things that motivate us, but it might be. It might be, because I think that the work I'm doing with my local community around nature, it seems that a lot of people from the conversations I've had are really motivated by helping nature, wanted to help nature. So you have to, I think, understand the group that you're working with to work out what aspects of SDGs they would value and would motivate them to do things.
Yes, it's lucky there's so many of the SDGs, because there are many ways in which people might engage. Some feel beyond your scope, and others feel like they're talking to you. But there was something for me in a previous inquiry. I worked with a group of friends who weren't all teachers or educators or involved at all. And there was something about seeing the process that we've been going through, the kind of idea of a project and taking something through and looking for ways to do it and exploiting opportunities and thinking about learning from it, that kind of action learning. That I think was quite intriguing for people who hadn't really thought that might be the way they're now learning. So there's the methodology or the way, the approach, that it might also be engaging, not only the topic, the focus.
Can I throw in the question of well-being? Because again, this is something that I think is a common theme to many of the stories. People have recognized that what they're doing is improving their health. As in, Norman, in your case, you were physically involved in a lot of activity which improved your health. Doug, you were talking about how reducing your diet, that helped your health. But there were a lot of comments also about how just being in contact with nature made people feel better. So it's this sense of being one with nature, and all part of a continuum, really.
And does that also relate to what you just said before, Jenny, about self-actualization, about actually feeling that as a result of what you're doing, you are developing yourself in some way, you're growing as an individual? I mean, the two must be connected, I would imagine.
I think they're I don't know if it's a spectrum, but certainly at one end there is the physical health, and perhaps at the other, at another point, the affective response.
Can I just add there as well that I think for me, and certainly the people I work with, there's something also that was reflected in this group about moving more towards that piece that's within our own environment. And I know we worked locally, but for a long time, since the inception of the current Sustainable Development Goals, I think we've spoken at a kind of an international level, and we've spoken about the importance of all United Nations countries coming together, and it's been quite big. And I think certainly people that I've been in my sphere have kind of found it a little bit untangible. It's been difficult to make connections with the bigger challenges aligned to sustainability. And while people will agree and they understand the seriousness of it, there's a bit of overwhelm in terms of how do I manage that within my sphere. And I think where this group, certainly I've seen, and I see it in my own work, that people are now looking at that well-being piece. They're looking at their own garden, they're looking at their own community, and really trying to apply that impact in, I suppose, in a way, in a smaller circle, but in a way that's more tangible for them. So it's quite interesting to see that turnabout. And again, to be able to see the process in something smaller. So I think that's quite interesting that people, and maybe COVID has been part of that, where we were forced a little bit to stay within a smaller geographic area for a short time, which caused people to be at home and to look at that work-life balance. So accidentally have been forced into it, but now have realized the benefit of it. So I think that's really what one of the themes that has come out of this for me, that the individual is really important and the immediate community and collaboration has been really important as well, in a way maybe that I don't think we've seen in a long time. So that's been quite interesting.
Absolutely. And for me, that also links into this kind of meaning and purpose. What does this mean for me? And what is my purpose in this context with these very global aims? But then it's brought down to what I eat and what's in my garden and how am I behaving? And that gives you meaning. Absolutely. So there's well-being on a number of fronts there, Jenny, isn't there?
Yes. I mean, just picking up that point again, I know I've mentioned it before, Doug, and I don't want to embarrass you, but I was really very impressed by the way you were able, through making your individual contribution, cutting down the number of what you consumed each day, then translating that into finance, what you were saving, and then contributing that finance to the community. And I think it's a beautiful example of how our individual efforts benefit not only ourselves, but also we can bridge that gap between the macro and the micro level.
Lynn, have you got a comment?
I think I've been listening for the last few minutes, and what I'm hearing are about values and about clear, commonly held values that we've possibly not been able to enunciate either in words or through action previously, and this project has enabled some of that. And I think I, meaning the individual in this case, is non-existent without there being society. So it's I in relation to others, I in relation to the natural world. It's the old no man or woman is an island. We exist within communities, and we start off within a family, and that's the first. And if we're lucky enough, we maintain that within the family too, but not always. So I think there are a myriad of issues that we could move from here to a new place based on our reflections on our current experience through this project. I can't take it any further just at the moment because my mind is at this very minute unable.
Okay, and we see that range in our projects, don't we? From individuals to families to school groups to community organizations. There's an array of scales of collaboration, inclusion, focus, whatever, in those digital stories.
Yeah, I mean, for me, definitely I felt much more connected to my immediate environment through what I've been doing, and also to my local community. And I came across this new word today for me. It was not me, but MWE, M-W-E, which I think sort of connects to what Glyn's just been saying, that we're not an island. We are the integration of ourselves with the rest of humanity. But at a local scale, that means family, friends, and community and environment. And I like MWE to embrace those things.
Mm.
Now, if I can come back, as you were talking through your slides, Norman, you were talking about pathways, and obviously each of our lives is a pathway. As I said in my digital story, for me this has been a very metaphysical experience, in that it has made me look again at myself as what I am physically, and just no more than all the other physical items around me, and that when the pathway of me as I exist now ends, I will dust to dust, whatever you want to describe it as. The pathway will begin again for someone or something else. Don't know where that came from, but my train of thought there, I've lost it somewhat.
I just jump in and say I came across another expression which I thought I could make it my epitaph on my grave if I have one, which is something like, we come from earth, we go back to the earth, and in between we garden. And I thought that was such a such a nice way of
Yeah.
describing what it is we do.
Yeah. So that's kind of connectedness, isn't it? Connectedness in the sense that we are part of nature, but connectedness, as we've been talking about in these projects. But it's quite an emotional discussion, really, we've moved into, haven't we, in terms of kind of real meaning for some of us as individuals in what we've done over the last few months. Maybe that's been enabled by something taking 6 months rather than 6 weeks. Time for that to be integrated into ourselves.
It's also about trust between us. You know, we trust each other. We do hold similar values, as Glyn has said, and we want to share how we feel, as well as what we've learned. Feelings and learnings are often very close together, but they're hard to express sometimes. So I think it's a manifestation of the relationships we have within the group.
And certainly the group feels supportive and interested. And that's such a huge help, isn't it? Well, for me it is.
Yeah.
Do you think we've covered these prompts that you gave us, other than perhaps the magazine and the next inquiry? But we seem to have ranged around the three issues that you flagged up here. Yeah,
I think we've given them a good go, and if any of the members of our community, when they watch this, want to contribute, they can send us their views on these prompts as well.
Yes,
on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn or via an email.
But on the what next, can we also think about how beyond the magazine, are there other ways in which we can share what we have learned? As some of you know, I was recently at a Royal College Psychiatrist conference, and it was the elephant in the room so often. The SDGs were there, but no one was actually referring to them. And I kept seeing parallels between the sorts of work we were doing and how well-being was emerging from it, and how we really should be sharing this with bigger, wider communities, such as health professionals.
Yeah, well, I agree, Jenny. Are you aware of any forthcoming conferences or events or platforms, maybe?
I am aware of one next year, which I had thought about possibly putting forward something on how we, through collaboration, we can actually approach the SDGs in a way such as we've been doing. But that was something I was going to mention to you before I did it.
Can I just mention here something I saw? I think it was either this morning or yesterday. There's a Spanish professor who's a famous Lego user, in his training, and he wrote, "Is collaboration the new way ahead?" And since I was involved in a project some years ago on collaboration, a 3-year project, I thought this is a bit late in coming, but it was. He's built it up from Lego, I think, this one now. The issues around collaboration are often opportunities within conferences, i.e. other arena, in order to spread the word. But not only conferences, I'm not against them, but also I'm and I would welcome your thoughts on this. I'm thinking of taking the thoughts that I have had and the reflections on what I've done with this project, and with your assistance, taking it further to publish in things like Age Concern. Because I think there are opportunities outside our normal education spheres, but it's still educative. And I would welcome your thoughts on that approach.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for getting perspectives published anywhere that we can have any sort of influence. I'm always a bit wary of publishers who don't allow free access to their journal. And that's always my concern. But there are times when you just have to publish in.
Exactly.
You just have to do it to, engage another audience that don't know about you, don't know about your work, which could benefit from, engaging with the sorts of things that we're discovering. I'm doing a Gaia course at the moment. I've done a few of them. Gaia Education is really interesting, and it's called Multiplier, which is people who are trying to take other people forward around action for SDGs. And it's a very simple online model for learning. It's 3 modules which are content-based, with a forum for discussion and some Zoom meetings and a project. And the whole thing's only 6 weeks long, but it seems to me it provides a very interesting model for how Life-Wide Education could offer educational opportunities in the sorts of things the sorts of frames that we use and the sorts of things we do, as another way of trying to be inclusive with our own learning. So I haven't got very far with thinking about that, but that could be a possibility.
And I wonder whether some of our colleagues who are not here today have thoughts as well, because there's teacher education, there's a lot of other context planning that others work in, where there may be different opportunities, and we could exploit that variety of backgrounds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're open, aren't we, to, as in everybody might be interested to think about beyond Life-Wide Magazine, but Life-Wide Magazine is a next step.
And it could be that it's an item for the agenda for the meeting in 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay, should we talk very briefly about the magazine then, which is,
Yes,
if
please.
you like, sort of text-based drawing together, consolidation of what we've learned through this process. So our intention is to try and produce it by the end of October. The core content will be the transcribed digital stories. And then we will have within there 3 sort of synthesis articles, 2 of which Jenny's written based on the survey work that we've done, and there'll be a conceptual piece. And that, I think, will, judging by what I've got already, will be quite a substantial issue. We can open the opportunity to everybody in the group to write something that they want to write if they want to, but we will need the content very quickly. So I'm not imagining that many people want to take that as an
We've
opportunity.
had quite a lot of illustrations in the course of the 6 months. People might want to offer some of those.
Yeah, I think we'll give a general invite, but I think if we want to try and publish this in a timely way, then it's unlikely, I think, that people will have a long period to write something about.
What about a single sheet poster?
Single sheet poster? That's a good idea, actually. Yeah. So what I'm going to do anyway, now I've got most of the stories transcribed, is send the stories back to people by the end of this week and see if they want to elaborate any further, make any changes and amendments to them, because some of them are very brief. But ask them to get it back to me by October the 20th, any changes they make. And that way we can meet a publication deadline by the end of the month. So that's the plan.
If we have another meeting in 3 months, we've been talking about it, maybe that generates some more thoughts as well, because it's time to reflect. And having looked at the magazine and what we've presented, there may be more. It may not finish with this magazine.
No, but we can actually have an addendum to the magazine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not done and dusted. It's a movable feast, and it can live like any other online document.
But I think Melissa, what you're suggesting is that people might be able to answer the last question, ideas for the next inquiry, once they've digested all the material we've generated so far.
Unless there's a burning suggestion that someone has been working on for some time, which there may be.
Yeah, we should have had a question mark over that, and maybe just leave that hanging.
Yes.
As an open invitation.
Absolutely. And how should people respond? Because Glyn was saying on LinkedIn or email.
Anyway,
whatever works.
We have multiple channels.
Exactly.
Do you have a time frame in mind, Norman, for the next inquiry?
I mean, we normally try and start them in the spring, don't we? March we've traditionally gone for March, but it doesn't have to be March.
So if there was a January meeting,
yeah,
we can take it from there.
That's a good idea. Yeah, connect the two together.
Okay, any more? I'm just conscious of the time and the time people have given us. Any more thoughts from the sorts of things we've been airing? A lot of ideas and floating a lot of possibilities. It looks like everybody's heads are buzzing with all of those things, so that's great. So thank you very much. I mean, thank you for the last months, and thank you for all the meetings, and thank you for the things you've contributed in words, spoken words, and in written words, and all those beautiful illustrations and glorious photographs that are in those digital stories. It's been a great experience, I think, for all of us. I loved, Glyn, I think you said a privilege to be part of that, and I thought that was such a great way of thanking everybody and but also taking something for yourself too from it. So that's lovely. Any other last comments?
Well, thank you, Melissa, as well, and Jenny, for guiding us through the process. It's been great fun working with you, and as always. And yeah, these experiences have to be joyful at the end of the day. And if they're not, then why do we do it? And I'll say that about everybody who's been involved. It's been a good experience because of not only the intelligence that you brought to it, but the joy that has come from the different meetings we've had. And as you know, we've said frequently, you go away feeling uplifted and inspired by what you've encountered. So it's great.
Can I just say that I think one of the things that it's heightened in me, and this is just a feeling, but I want to express it about this meeting also, is the sense of wonder and awe about what is and how things can be. I just say that completely from my head and my heart. Wonder and awe in what I've seen on the gallery, what I've discussed in terms of hearing people talk, and in the creative and enthusiastic way in which people have overcome all sorts of issues to produce something which I think is an outstanding achievement. So thank you. And Schumacher said the small is beautiful. So let's remember that small is relative, but it's also important. Yeah. So small in number we may be, but great in thoughts, and I'm still in awe. Thank you.
What more can we say, Glyn?
Thank you, Glenn, and apologies for calling you Doug earlier.
It's all right. I've been called worse.
Okay, well, thank you and good night. I think everybody here, it's evening, isn't it? So have a good evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.
Hope to see you soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.